This is the WJW podcast, brought to you by the Washington Jewish Week and Mid-Atlantic Media. Welcome to the WJW podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Trudler, editor of the Washington Jewish Week. I'm here today with Moshe Lavi, a former captain in the Israel Defense Forces, and the brother-in-law of Omri Miran, who was kidnapped from his home in Kibbutz Nachal Oz in southern Israel, less than 3 miles from the Gaza border, on October 7th by Hamas. Now, 4 months later, Omri is still being held captive by Hamas. Moshe has been extremely active and vocal in terms of his advocacy, not just for Omri, but for all of the hostages who remain in captivity, and has been a really strong advocate in a very public way in terms of the importance of bringing them home. Moshe, thank you for taking the time to chat.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me today.
Of course. So, as we all know, our world and our lives, but especially the lives of you and your family, changed drastically on October 7th. I know that Omri was at home with your sister, with his wife, Lishay, their 2 young daughters, Roni and Alma. Can you walk us through what happened on that day?
Yes. So on October 7th, my entire immediate family was targeted. My parents live in Sderot, which was attacked, but they were rescued. My sister Michal lives in Oraner, where terrorists were repelled before they were able to do what they did in many other kibbutzim in the region. And my sister Lishay lives in Kibbutz Nachal Oz, where hundreds of terrorists were able to penetrate the kibbutz early on October 7th, already around 6:30 a.m., and ravaged it, killed many kibbutz members and kidnapped 5 kibbutz members and 2 other visitors. Lishay and Omri were in their home when Hamas terrorists, their accomplices, tried to barge into their apartment, their house, first through the windows of the bathroom, and then they went to the front door. They used a teenage boy from the kibbutz called Tomer to lure them to open the door. So Lishay and Omri obviously opened it to save Tomer's life. Tomer was later executed by Hamas. He was 17 years old, even though he followed the instructions to lure his neighbors at gunpoint, of course, to open their door. For hours, Omri, Lishay, and my 2 baby nieces, Roni and Alma, were held captive in their home. They were abused and held at gunpoint. They were later grouped with another family, the Dan family, whose daughter Mayan was murdered, 18 years old. And eventually they were separated at 1:30 p.m. Omri was taken hostage alongside Tzachi, Dan, and 2 American visitors who came to the kibbutz that day, Judith and Natalie Ra'anan. They were all taken together, kidnapped by Hamas terrorists. Lishay was able to tell him that she loves him, she'll take care of the girls, and ask him not to be a hero, because they were waiting for him to return. And that was the last time she saw him. Lishay was instructed to stay put or else she'll be killed. She was able to stop my niece Roni from running to Omri before he was kidnapped, luckily. And then for hours more, until 5:30 p.m. or so that day on October 7th, Lishay was continuing being captive, in effect, in the home of the Dan family alongside others, until she was rescued by the IDF. She witnessed all the horrors that engulfed outside, the burning of houses, the screaming of adults and babies, those who were murdered, their neighbors. But luckily she was rescued, and she's now displaced alongside my entire immediate family. She's in Kibbutz Kramim, and she keeps advocating for Omri from the first week. it's a joint effort of our families.
Yeah, clearly, look, your family has endured so much. You on this end, on this side of the ocean, Lishay, obviously, and the two girls. How are you doing? How is Lishay doing? And how is Lishay handling two very young girls? One I think is just 2 years old, one is less than a year old, in terms of their father not being at home.
Yeah, it's been a difficult time. I was in New York on October 7th, so obviously felt very helpless. Was with my friends and family online, virtually on WhatsApp groups. But there was nothing I could do besides being there with them and in spirit. So it was a very, very difficult situation for me. And obviously for my family who experienced the violence firsthand. We experienced violence before. I mean, I grew up in Sderot, so we were a target of rockets and other terror attacks and military operations over the years, but there was nothing like October 7th. My sister recovers, tries to heal, but it's clear that we cannot really heal until the hostages return home, until Omri returns to hug my nieces. She's doing her best. She's truly an inspirational woman. She speaks everywhere she can, in rallies, in the media, meets elected officials in Israel. She also traveled to Europe, and she does all she can to raise awareness to our humanitarian plea, all she can to raise awareness to our plea for a family that misses Omri so much. And at the same time, deals with the trauma of the violence, deals with displacement. Over 100,000 Israelis are displaced today. And Lishay is no different. My entire immediate family is no different. So we're dealing with that hardship, dealing with the violence, and then dealing, as you said, raising two girls. My parents help her as much as they can, but they're all old now, relatively in their late 60s, so it's very difficult for them as well. And Ronnie, the Lishai's eldest daughter, speaks of the violence. She's 2.5 years old. She speaks of the violence. She knows what happened. She knows her father was taken away. She knows he's not present. And she draws the violence, she draws her feelings, and it's very difficult to explain to someone her age what has happened. We try our best to do it. I was with the family for a while in Israel. I had to return for obvious reasons. Now I'm back in the US, so I saw the struggles not only through the camera and the WhatsApp chat, but the struggles as they are in reality. But we're doing our best, and we focus on the advocacy work we do, because it gives us the strength and hope to carry on. It gives us the strength to tell Ronnie that we're doing everything we can to bring her daddy Omri home, and the same to Alma, who is 10 months old, and so she's less aware in the same way to the situation. But she clearly knows that something is wrong, because every time she sees Omri's poster that is right behind me, she tries and touch him. She tries and touch it. She recognizes the person. And she knows he's not there. She can't really hold him. She can't really hug him.
לילה? טוב, אבא, מי שומע אותו? הוא שומע אותנו? כן. ומה עוד נגיד לו? שאנחנו מה? אנחנו או... חכות לך. אנחנו... חכות לך. חכות לך. אוהבות אותך. לילה טוב. אבא. רוני, מה את מציירת? אבא. את אבא? כן. איזה יופי את מציירת. באיזה צבע את מציירת את אבא? כתום. טוב. רוני, את רוצה להגיד משהו לאבא?
I saw some videos of your sister and brother-in-law and the two girls, and one thing that was apparent to me was just the love, a very loving family, and heartbreaking to watch, knowing the current situation. But it was just clear, and it was very evident to me, just the close bond that the family has, and it's a remarkable thing to see. Moshe, you mentioned the advocacy. I want to touch on that a little bit because that's something you've expended a great deal of effort and energy on that front. And again, as I mentioned before, not just for Omri, but for you really have been a very visible presence on the advocacy scene for all the families of the hostages whose loved ones were abducted on October 7th. Can you tell me how have your efforts been received, whether it be by the media, by the decision makers in Washington, or by humanitarian organizations such as the Red Cross?
Yeah. First, if I may, I just want to refer to your first statement. Yes, it's such a loving family. Lishay and Omri met in March 2020 as the COVID pandemic broke, and within 3.5 years built a beautiful family, a beautiful home together to their two baby daughters. I never saw her happier in her life than when I see her with Omri, and I hope that happiness will return. In regards to the advocacy work, for me, for our family, it was clear from the first week we will have to be vocal. We'll have to be vocal, and we'll have to, if you may, conscript to our struggle as hostage families. There are different struggles in this dreadful war, and we of course support all of them. But it was our choice to do that as much as we can. So we go in the media. We've been in countless outlets here in the US, in Europe, and in Israel, of course, to spread the word, to share Omri's story as a human being. It's important that we give a face and a story to the term hostage, that we give faces and stories to the number 136 hostages who still remain captive, and over 240 hostages who were captive since October 7th. In our meetings with policymakers, I think the majority of them received us well, irrespective of where they fall in the political spectrum. I've been empathetic. Some understand our plea better than others. And what we try to convey is that this crisis, the hostage crisis, should be in the forefront of the war, the forefront of the conflict. It needs to be above the toxic political discourse that has been on the streets, in the social media, and in Congress and other parliaments around the world from October 8th. Even before Israel was able to fully defend its kibbutzim, its town, its people, and repel the invaders, Hamas invasion. Even before that, we saw on the streets of New York and other places around the world demonstrations in support of the atrocities that happened on October 7th. And that's the toxic political discourse I talk about, because they don't speak about the hostages, which should be above anything else, because it's a humanitarian issue, a multi-faith issue, and a multinational issue. So that's what we try to convey to policymakers. And that's what we try to convey as well to humanitarian organizations, international organizations, such as the United Nations, such as the International Committee of the Red Cross. I've been in meetings in both institutions, and I will continue to engage with them as much as I can, and tell them the reality as it is, that they have not been vocal enough from the first day. They have not been adamant enough when it comes to their condemnation of Hamas and their accomplices. and that have not been consistent enough in their demands for the release of the hostages. If they were consistent, if they were public from day one, if they would have created coalitions of international organizations, of member states of the United Nations in support of the hostages from day one, I think the situation would have been very different now, and Hamas would have felt isolated. Hamas, however, did not feel isolated because there was no such coalition. And so Israel and us stood alone in many ways. Israel has allies, and of course they've been vocal, but the issue of the hostages should have been unanimously supported by all member states of the United Nations and by all international organizations from the first day.
Thank you for that. You mentioned, Moshe, about the remaining 136 hostages. There were just recently reports that at least, I believe it's 32 of the hostages, of those remaining hostages being held by Hamas, have been killed. Have you heard anything from the Israeli government about Omri's status? And how do those revelations impact your continued advocacy to bring the hostages home?
So as we know, as far as we know, the families, there are 31 who were confirmed dead by the official authorities. There were reports of additional up to 50, I believe, but those were neither confirmed nor conveyed to the families. So we disregard these reports. I think they distract us from focusing on what matters and is advocating for the release of the hostages with the policymakers and with the wider public, because we also go to community events and to rallies to advocate in those ways, and not only in one-on-one or several families meeting officials. I don't let these reports detract our efforts, and I not let these reports derail me from the belief that Omri is alive, that I'm fighting for his return. And I know that he was alive 9 weeks ago because some of the hostages were released in the first deal that was struck between Israel and the terrorist organization Hamas. Reported that he was alive in late November. We know he was kidnapped alive. So my work assumption is that he's alive now until we receive different news. But of course, we dread every moment. We wake up every moment with the fear that we receive the dire news about his condition. And to be honest, I feel the same whenever I hear about a different hostage who was murdered by Hamas or killed as a direct result of being held hostage by Hamas. And they're responsible for the death of every hostage, because we all became one family in a way, all the families of hostages, irrespective of disagreements on how to move forward with our advocacy work. But I try and focus on the hope and project that hope so that others will rally behind us. That's what my sister does, and our entire family. If you'll meet Omri's father, Danny, who's currently in Portugal advocating for Omri there. He met the Portuguese president among the rest. You'll see how much hope he has. And if he has hope for his son, who am I to not project the same kind of hope and hold strong to that hope that Omri will return to us alive?
Okay. If you had the ability to speak to Omri today, to send him a message, what would you tell him? What would you say?
The first thing I'll say, not to Omri, but to whoever was watching it, that Omri learned that my sister Lishay and his 2 baby nieces survived October 7 because of interviews like this, which is why we keep speaking to the media. It gives hope to hostages who may be able to receive the news, and some, including those who were released, reported that they were able to somehow receive the news through the radio, through TV segments. Some of their captors used it as psychological warfare and conveyed it to them, and they've heard it from other hostages who heard it. So it's important for us to keep speaking up, despite what some may say. about our public engagement. Second, if I could tell Omri something, is that his faith and his story is known all around the world, that dignitaries and elected officials worldwide know who he is and are working hard to bring about his release, and that I hope he continues to send strength to my sister, because she feels that strength that comes to her, and I hope he stays strong despite being held captive. And we try and we try and focus on that message. And if I could convey it to him, I wish I could. That's what I would have told him.
Moshe, one final question. You mentioned you were born and grew up in Sderot, and as we mentioned, Omri and Lishay and their family live in Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Hamas has said that they hope to be able to repeat October 7th again and again. What are your thoughts in terms of the future of those once very vibrant communities in southern Israel near the Gaza border, and what steps could be taken to better protect them from anything like this ever happening again?
So I will comment as the ordinary person. I'm not a policymaker, and I don't. I'm not in the decision-making table. But luckily, Israel is a democracy, and a very vibrant democracy that provides citizens the platform to voice their requests, demands, concerns with policymakers. And I'm grateful for that. This is why our struggle as families of hostages was able to be powerful. This is why the struggle of the communities in the northwestern Negev or the Gaza envelope region is powerful as well. I think it's clear that any positive path forward with our neighbors in the Gaza Strip could not include radical elements like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, could not include accomplices that support them, whether through inciting for violence and hate in educational institutions, including those that are run by UNRWA, which is a United Nations agency. And so I hope the path forward will allow us to build a true partnership with Gaza, because without that, we cannot live in security. But I am realistic, I'm sober, and I know such process will take decades and not longer. And if you look on in an historical perspective, on conflict zones all around the world, these things are not solvable within years or months. They take at times centuries to be solved. Just look on the European continent as an example. And so until then, I hope our government will continue implementing policies that are conducive to saving lives, to protect our security. It's clear that the policies that preceded October 7 were not successful. It's clear that tolerating organizations like Hamas, allowing the channeling of funds to Hamas was a mistake. Even if the reason was trying to alleviate the humanitarian issues that exist in the Gaza Strip, they were done wrongly, in my opinion. And so I hope solutions and new policies will bring about a change in that region of Israel. It's clear that many citizens lost trust in the government, in the security apparatus because of October 7. So that trust will need to be rebuilt. And part of that trust, part of that social contract that needs to be rebuilt and again, I speak on my behalf, is our conviction of many people in the region and in the wider Israeli public, that the government must continue to prioritize the return of the hostages who are subjugated to torture, abuse, violence, including sexual violence, deprivation of food, water, proper sanitary conditions. So prioritizing releasing them, bringing them home as a short-term solution to the hostage crisis is necessary for us to ensure that the social contract between the government, the state, and its institutions to the citizens, and especially those who were attacked on October 7, could be repaired. I think without their safe return, it will be very difficult to rehabilitate the region. It will be very difficult for us to regain the trust with the state institutions. But I want to believe that the government is doing all it can, and I understand the geopolitical complexities. And I understand that we're facing a terrorist organization that operates on a different rationale and has demands that are dangerous to Israel's security. But I want to believe that they do all they can to find a solution, to find a formula that we can digest in order to bring them home. And as part of that process of bringing them home, we'll be able to return to my family, will be able to return to their homes in Sderot, in Overran, in Nachal Oz, rebuild the communities, and continue flourish the Negev region, flourish and blossom it, as we've done as a country and as people for the past generations.
Moshe Lavi, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. We, of course, keep you and your sister Lishay, your two nieces, of course, your brother-in-law Omri, and your entire family and all the families of the hostages in our thoughts and our prayers and our tefillah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.